Thanks for being with us once again. An interesting topic today, hair loss. Male pattern hair loss and baldness, female pattern loss, baldness. I mean, there are a lot of issues in this area. We want to deal with today, are there miracle cures? Not really, unfortunately. Unless you just want to have surgical plugs put in and transplants, and or you want to use pharmaceuticals and medicinals. That can be helpful. Certainly minoxidil is helpful. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Minoxidil has some significant side effects with blood pressure and so on. Drugs like finasteride, Propecia, which men use quite a bit for slowing down the conversion of testosterone to DHT, can be helpful. Before we get into the details, just want to encourage you, this is going to be a nice solid overview, a teaching on hair loss. What you can do to minimize your risk and potential, and then understanding some of the details from a female side, certainly from a male side and from a guy's side, certain things that you do, certain things that you could improve that you are doing, and areas that you could diminish your potential risk or risk factors. So, want to encourage you that this is not 100% all-encompassing, because I only know that I'm going to talk about today the role of stress and how it plays in hair loss, and how many times folks that are undergoing major levels of distress and trauma in their lives, emotional, then not eating, poor nutrient, all that affects hair. But certainly you can see the characteristic genetic components to this. So we've got a lot to cover. I want to thank you for joining us today. We would really encourage and appreciate your referral of what we teach and what we do to friends, neighbors. Tell folks about us. We certainly would appreciate it. I know we've got a Facebook page that we're trying to utilize more. Tell folks about the website. Encourage them. They might have issues with PMS. Actually, I went to our YouTube at AskJoeDiMatteo.com, and that YouTube site, and read some of the comments by some women that viewed. I don't know who they were. And they don't listen to the radio. They've just somehow picked it up. They view it, and a couple of the women were thankful that said, "Hey, I never realized what you talked about with PMDD. I've been using, and PMS. I've been using medicines and pharmaceuticals and antidepressants, and I never heard anyone bring the perspective that you brought." And I'm not bragging here. God forbid. What I'm saying is you never know who you might be able to impact and effect change in their lives and help them. I mean, a couple of these women, there were 3 or 4 comments, they were just thrilled because they just had never heard of this perspective before. They obviously were very traditional in mindset. I just think we bring a lot of core base, alternative, wise, naturopathic solutions and interventions that are hugely helpful. So once again, thanks for tuning in. I'm going to read a little scripture maybe after the break, just as a word of encouragement for you today. So let's get into this. Hair loss, male, female. So what are there differences? Some. Yeah, there are some differences. Certainly. Do the components that affect men, do they work one and the same for women? Not really. Do some of the areas juxtapose one another? In other words, hormonal imbalances in women, are they the same hormone imbalances in men? Not really. They vary. Then, is it just all about the famed DHT? What is DHT? Dihydrotestosterone. Is DHT the only component? I don't know that it's the only component. That's what we want to try to teach you today. What is the overriding factor? Alopecia areata, so there's the fancy term for hair loss, alopecia. And then under the umbrella of alopecia, hair loss, you've got things like areata, where you have specific areas of just loss of hair. All right? That can be immune. That can be autoimmune, self-attacking, so on. You could have universalis, which is a horrible condition, which is literally complete hair loss all around the body. You just lose hair everywhere. Eyebrows, hair, armpit, you just lose hair everywhere. Excuse me. This is a significant, usually autoimmune type reaction So it wouldn't be fair if I didn't at least mention them, because many folks might be tuning into this and say, oh, I want answers for alopecia universalis. That's not really my focus today, although I do think there are things that you can do here. You got to be on an autoimmune protocol. You have to be on a gut repair protocol. You have to look at gluten and wheat intolerances for universalis. That's autoimmune, self-attacking, damaging to the follicles, poisoning in essence of the follicles. So not my focus today. I want to focus more on what we see as the huge factor, the predominance of male pattern baldness and loss of hair. Now, what's even being understood more and more recently, female pattern baldness and so on. So you can see areata can occur men and women, universalis can occur in men and women, and there are other technical components to this. But then what about I'm just losing my hair? And I don't have a disease. I'm not losing it everywhere, but I'm losing it here, the crown of my head. And you're a woman and you're perimenopausal and you're losing hair. What's going on? Okay, so let's just start rolling through this. Number one, can there be some thyroid issues? Absolutely. And certainly we have all about thyroid, teaching you all about your thyroid issues, and low thyroid hormone and low T3 of the thyroid hormone process can certainly be a factor here. This is a huge problem, especially in women. A lot of times after birthing and having children and giving birth, big issue here with thyroid. Also, thyroid antibody production. So you could be making antibodies that are damaging your thyroid that then could be damaging the body's ability to make thyroid hormone. Hair loss is a significant part of that. Secondly, could I just have poor nutrient status? And I'm just going to kind of have to just list some of these down here. Could it just be poor nutrients? Absolutely. Many folks are suffering from just poor, they eat poorly. They just don't have adequate families of the bees. They just don't have adequate antioxidants in their diet. So you have to then see that the follicles are a living organism that are going to be affected by oxidative distress, poor nutrient status. So you say, wait a minute, I've got, my grandfather had hair loss, so you're telling me now that I'm losing my hair and it's all about like poor nutrients? Not necessarily, but you can't tell me we're not seeing more and more individuals to a greater degree, young men in 20s and 30s with the loss of hair. Let's look at every single aspect. Can the thyroid be creating some issues? Without question. Can low nutrient status be creating some problems? Without question. Big issues all affect us here. Antioxidants. What do you mean antioxidants? Vitamin C, E, resveratrol. Lack of adequate antioxidants in the body will without doubt allow the hair follicles to be poisoned and damaged more efficiently. So when you have adequate antioxidants on board, you protect or you create a level of protection to the follicle. So if I start taking Perfect E, buffered vitamin C, your trans resveratrol, does that stop my male pattern hair bald, loss? Not maybe necessarily stop it, but you're reducing the amount of oxidative distress to those follicles. You have to consider that antioxidants or lack thereof play a role. Now let's get into a little bit more of what I would consider the meat of hair loss. Okay, so what's happening here? What is going on? So I'm gonna erase a little bit of this side, and we'll come back to this. But you have to understand that there's a hormone cascade that that could be occurring here that's affecting hair loss. So first, principally, you have DHEA being converted to, or I don't know how I should say this, but coming from the adrenals and significant amount anyway of testosterone. You certainly have it coming from pregnenolone too, but I don't want to get too junky here. DHEA converts to testosterone. in principle. Testosterone can then convert to dihydrotestosterone, and another component of this, but I'm going to keep this simple, and estrogen. Now, this is very important because significant conversion of a man's testosterone to dihydrotestosterone causes enlarged prostate gland, BPH, and also poisons the follicle, the hair follicle, and will cause loss of hair. Can this happen in women? Yes, women can convert predominance of testosterone over to dihydrotestosterone. That poisons the hair follicles. It enlarges a man's prostate. So you say, well, then that's simple. This DHT is very evil and bad, so why don't we just do something to just block and stop that? Well, not so fast. Dihydrotestosterone has physiologic role in our body. We need it. Inadequate levels are problematic. And when you start using medications like Propecia, that came from the original drug of, drawing a blank on the name, but the active ingredient is finasteride. And finasteride literally reduces testosterone to DHT conversion. There's another drug, dutasteride, for men's prostate enlargement that almost more specifically blocks DHT, more powerful. But here's the problem. These long-term, these drugs, recent literature even shown that for men anyway, even though this drug can reduce enlargement of the prostate, it can actually encourage aggressive forms of prostate cancer. There are a lot of psychological impacts that come from the use of this medication that blocks DHT production. We see that there's not only emotional, there's also an impact of this class of medication having significant, and there was another area that I'm drawing a blank on, but there's emotional, there are increasing rates of prostate cancer indications or aggressive forms of prostate cancer. This drug just creates a lot of issues from a pharmaceutical standpoint. For men, libido, sex drive diminishes. Erectile dysfunction in some, a lot of sexual side effects when you block DHT. So you say, all right, so Joe, what are you saying? Does Propecia, 1 milligram of finasteride, because that's what that dose is, 5 milligram is the drug that's used for men's prostate enlargement, does it work? Well, it certainly can work. I don't think there's any question it can work, as long as you can tolerate some of the side effects. So how about if I use Propecia, finasteride, 1 milligram orally, and I use minoxidil topically? Can that help? Yeah, I mean, absolutely, as long as you can tolerate some of the pharmaceutical side effects. We would want to try to teach you some other ways to be able to do that. Now, what's happening in women? Women certainly can convert here. Unfortunately for men, I think I started it up here somewhere, men are making a lot of estrogen, so they're converting a lot of their testosterone, not only DHT, but they're converting it to a lot of estrogen, which impacts follicles. Now, what does that? Well, alcohol, excessive alcohol consumption can create problems there. Men that are very sedentary, that are inactive, have a very poor diet, they have a tendency to shunt and convert their testosterone over to dihydrotestosterone and their testosterone over to estrogen. This, without question, impacts their hair follicles. So you guys, you got to start with the basics. If you're overweight, we've got to lose some weight. If you drink, especially excessively, that needs to change, because the more ethanol you consume, more alcohol you consume, you encourage this conversion pathway, and this will damage the hair follicles. Well, that sounds ridiculous, but my grandfather lost all his hair, and I'm losing mine. You're telling me that it's because I have 3 or 4 beers a day? I'm saying that process is, what you're doing is encouraging it. There are some genetic tendencies. Now, we know that pharmaceuticals that block this process can arrest that state. When you stop using the pharmaceuticals, the process continues. So we know there's something to DHT. We know there's something to oxidative distress in the follicles. We know there's something to hormone imbalances. Can medications be helpful? Without question. Can we do some natural preps? Absolutely, without question. So, You've got the hormone side of this. Women, it gets a little more complicated, frankly, for women, because what we see in a lot of women that are insulin resistant, and that could be from a multiple of factors, a poor diet, too many carbs, too much sugar, or environmental chemicals encourage this insulin resistance. So this is a whole nother teaching that we have on the live stream. But here's what's the takeaway message? What's happening? For many women, they have increasing levels of testosterone, diminishing levels of progesterone, and sometimes diminishing levels of estrogen as they age. This imbalanced hormone cascade can lead to more loss of hair in women as they get towards perimenopause, the changes, and also postmenopausally. Postmenopausal, it's usually a drop of most hormones except testosterone. But for a woman that doesn't have, I don't want to say equal, but balanced levels of testosterone to progesterone to estrogen, if she doesn't have a balanced cascade, she's going to have a tendency to lose more hair. Also, what we'll see is that this testosterone, once again, there's a conversion process to what? DHT, dihydrotestosterone, in women as well. So, pharmaceuticals, other pharmaceutical approaches, spironolactone, that is a diuretic, a water pill, doesn't actually block DHT. It interferes with an enzyme activity, so it doesn't have as many side effects. So there are some forward-thinking dermatologists that will encourage the use of a topical pharmaceutical spironolactone solution to be used for those that are losing hair. It can be helpful, especially in women with female hormone imbalances. Actually, topical solutions of melatonin that we've made and compounded for individuals, believe it or not, very helpful. What's the function with melatonin? Melatonin doesn't affect this hormonal cascade, but melatonin is a powerful antioxidant. So back to what I said earlier, low antioxidant status. Well, you just want me to buy C and Perfect E? Not really. I mean, low antioxidant status, poor nutrient status. I don't have adequate Bs. I don't have adequate silicone. I'm not taking in nutrients. They can affect and encourage the damaging of the hair follicle. So a woman's hair health, if you will, can absolutely be affected by a hormone cascade different than men, but nonetheless, her hormones changing play a key role. Can the use of oral contraceptives affect and encourage hair loss? Yes, it can. Can the use of acid blocking drugs? You are on a PPI, the purple pill. Yes, it can. Why? It reduces hydrochloric acid production, which diminishes protein and mineral absorption. So the use of the purple pill can affect and encourage hair loss. Okay? Now, I don't want you to go, if you go look up the inserts on purple pill and say, well, it doesn't say in there that it causes, male pattern health. No. Don't get too hung up on that. You have to see this as a consortium, a building on the foundation. I might have some genetic tendencies to lose hair genetically, and I'm pushing and converting to testosterone to DHT, and it's poisoning the follicles. I could have a couple beers a day. I could have a sedentary lifestyle. I don't believe in 3 squares. I got to eat on the run. I'm busy. I don't really care about fruits and vegetables. I'm not spending money on supplements. I heard that that's just expensive urine. You've got this whole cascade that is, I've got a beer belly. You've got this whole cascade that is going to encourage the loss of hair like you can't even believe. The follicles are more easily sensitized. They're more easily damaged, greater propensity, certainly, for loss. So we've got these acid blocking drugs. Do you realize that even chronic use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, the NSAIDs, can affect pattern baldness or affect hair loss in men and women? Not necessarily the genetic tendencies, but it pushes all these genetic tendencies. So we've got medications, alcohol consumption, low nutrient status, low antioxidant status that we consume. In men, more estrogen. In women, more testosterone. Can thyroid, absolutely. You say, wait a minute, way too much. I don't know nothing about this. Well, no, we have to at least check and see what your thyroid is doing. We should do, and maybe I should hold that for after the break, and I will, but we should evaluate thyroid function. We should evaluate male and female hormones. We should get a DHT level. Are there some nutrients and so on that can be helpful? Without question. Complex issue with some answers. Frankly, can I say to you that if you have a strong genetic disposition and it's been in your family line with great grandparents and so on, and there's a skipping many times of generational issues, I can't tell you that if you do all of this correctly that it wipes that out. Many of you are still going to be in a position, but if you are under high stress and you don't eat well and you're overweight, your hormones, male and female, are imbalanced, you have a low antioxidant status, there's no question, and all the other, and you use, anti-inflammatory drugs, and you have some heartburn and reflux, and you haven't gotten the digestive situation under control, and you're using the purple pill on a semi-regular basis, you have to see that all of these dominoes are going to begin to fall, and they will, without question, rush and push the potential for hair loss. So we're going to take a break in a minute here. And when we come back, this is going to be a pretty quick and direct teaching today. When we come back, give you a couple, not necessarily do's and don'ts. We've already covered that. We're going to give you a couple areas of that we have to think about, what we should evaluate. And then a couple nutrients that can be very helpful, and some recent studies on tocotrienols in the last 4 to 5 years, small abstracts, that are showing some incredible results with literally regeneration of hair production. Go to a break. You stay with us. A couple of minutes. We'll be back, and we'll finish up hair loss, men and women. Stay with us. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for staying with us. Just a quick few minutes, just talk about the Scripture, the Bible. For many of you that are watching this, this is very much the core of your life. It's the anchor for your life. It's my anchor. For many of you that might be watching this now, you're instantly turned off. It's not. You have nothing to do with this. And you're kind of, unfortunately, I'd say, in your own little world on this issue. And I don't believe in a God. I believe we just all came together. What kind of a God lets little babies die, and you've got anger and animosity? I don't know what your issues might be. I'm not real sure. But I want to be able to tell you that if you would just be open, this hair loss teaching affects your today and your appearance and your look and my look and all of that. What we talk about here affects your eternality. This affects not your tomorrow. This affects the rest of your life. Whether you believe it or not, the Bible teaches very explicitly that, for example, that a man, a woman, we're taken from dust, but we have a spirit that will live forever, either in His presence or not in His presence. I love my dogs. I have 2 of them. I have 3 cats, and I love my pets. Josiah doesn't like his, but I like mine.
You like me, though.
But I love Josiah. That's the key. I love this guy. But, as much as I love my bulldog and my daughter's dog and our 3 cats, I wish, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. I mean, obviously the Revelation, the book of Revelation talks about, literally, if you will, there's animals of type in heaven, but I don't know that my pet's going to be there, if you will. Obviously, I don't believe that's going to, because they have no spirit. See, we have a spirit. Let me just read to you just something real quick out of the Psalm, just something to think about. And the psalmist says that our God is in heaven and He does whatever pleases Him. But others, or folks that trust in themselves or in other things, they idolize those areas of their lives. And it says that our God does whatever He does, but their idols, man's idols, they are silver and gold, made by human hands. And they have mouths, but they can't speak, and they have eyes, and they can't see. They have ears, and they can't hear, and they have noses, but they can't smell. They have hands, but they can't feel. They have feet, but they can't walk. They can't utter a sound with their throats. Those who make them will be like them, and so will all who trust in them. And then there's a specific word here. This is a word to the children of Israel. All you Israelites, but this is a word for us today too. Trust in the Lord. He is their help and shield. House of Aaron, trust in the Lord. He is their help and shield. You who fear him, trust in the Lord. He is their help and shield. And there's a lot of specific references here about how God will cause you to flourish and that he'll provide protection and provision in the rest of this. But here's the key. That last line I said, for those of you who trust in him, whether it's to the Jew or to the Gentile, to the African American, to the Caucasian, to the Hispanic, it doesn't matter. None of this matters to God. We're all his creation. But you're not his child until you make a full acknowledgement of the provision that he's made in Christ the Messiah. We can build idols, physical, in worship, or I can worship my work and my hobby, making money, my business, buildings that I build. I can worship any and all of this. I can worship my pets and my animals. I can worship my wife, my children. I can put all these things above him, and that's idol worship. The reality of it is that on a daily basis, as I discussed earlier on our radio show today, there almost has to be a continuous conversion that's taking place. A life, a heart that is continually looking to him, and that is, we have to work. I'm working here today. I'm teaching you here today. But our lives, as they become more and more here in this direction, see, God orders these areas of your lives, the horizontal areas, as we become more vertical. Our problem is, as human beings, we focus on the horizontal plane, not on the vertical. And what we focus on, it says that you become like your idol. In other words, you literally will squalor, if you will, in your idol worship, because this is where our focus is. If we can learn to be continuously converted to his will, God will align our steps in this area. I hope it encourages you. I hope that blesses you. Let's get back to the hair loss and the alopecia. Now, we're going to get to the nuts and bolts. What can you actually do? Well, number one, I said we have to look at your thyroid function, right? Thyroid peroxidase antibodies, which are literally autoimmune issues. You say, wait a minute, if I'm actually having male pattern baldness, you should still get a thyroid level. We need to get a free T3, a free T4, a TSH. We talk about, we can do these. We can have you go to walk-in labs. We can have you do saliva, literally a blood spot, test that can define this for you. We can have the kit sent out to you. You should get this done. You should have a testosterone level done. You should have an estrogen level and a progesterone level. And ultimately, via blood spot or blood work with your physician or wherever you are, you got to get a DHT level. Because if you're making too much of this, this is going to poison the hair follicles. All right? Serum ferritin and iron. In women, this is a big issue. There are some women that if they do not maintain certain levels of serum ferritin and certain iron levels, they're much, much more prone for hair loss, brittleness of hair, and so on. We see this is for men and women, poor digestion. Low hydrochloric acid, that should be an L, not a T, not hydrochlorothiazide, hydrochloric acid, poor digestion, doesn't allow you to extract your proteins, your amino acids, and minerals. All right, so we can see that there are certainly some nutrient issues. There are some blood labs that we see very specifically for women. We can see men and women are affected by DHT, as you already learned. Men very much affected by high estrogen. Women affected by low progesterone. Women very much affected by high testosterone. So you can see there's some variance, men to women. Why I did these together, because I think this is somewhat confusing. But if I do them separately, it's not even going to make sense. You should see a side by side. And then universal, men and women, you could have underlying thyroid. You can still have the genetic leaning and tendencies, but these areas can push. And lastly, I mentioned at the beginning, before I get into nutrients, why up here versus here? Well, because the majority of the DHT receptors are here. So you can see why pharmaceuticals that are designed to kind of reduce a man's prostate enlargement are also used for hair loss, because finasteride, dutasteride, those pharmaceuticals slow down that conversion of testosterone to DHT, and some of them do it almost exclusively, which is a bad thing, side effects. And that's where we are. So what can you do naturally? What can you do interventionally that I think is very much, pretty much a natural approach to this? And that's down in this category. Tocotrienols. We had a little bit of a backorder problem, but we want to get in another version of this where some of the more recent studies are showing that a very high concentrate mixture blend. Now, we have tocotrienols in our Perfect D, but the Perfect D is a balanced prep. Tocopherol, tocotrienol. There's something about that we can't quite put our hands on, something about the tocotrienols and concentrates of a mixed blend, very high. There's actually some abstracts showing as much as 40% on average improvement literally in hair regrowth. As little as, in some of the abstracts showing as little as 20 to 30% respond. Some of the studies show as high as 70% respond, but the average overall response is about 40% in regrowing new hair. So why wouldn't I do it? No reason why you wouldn't. We're going to put together a little pack, a little hair pack, if you will, hair loss pack, and it'll contain, but you need to give us a couple of days or a week. I don't know when you're going to be viewing this live stream. If you're viewing it live today, if it's today, we will have this available for you. That's our background music here. This is our lead singer, and he's going to go he's going to go back in time. All right, next, BioSil. Believe it or not. Now, BioSil can't do anything for the follicle, but this stabilized form of silicone, orthosalicylic choline stabilized orthosalicylic acid, is documented to improve hair quality, literally structure. It's amazing. But remember, we have to kind of get to the follicle as well as the shaft of the hair. So men and women are candidates for Prostate Plus. Maybe more for men, the Prostate Plus. Maybe women, I might just use our saw palmetto concentrate. All right? Men, I'd probably go a little bit more to the Prostate Plus, but this saw palmetto concept, standardized extracts, not junk, please, can be helpful. Why? Because you're interfering and slowing down naturally this conversion of DHT. For women, I got a W here, for women, many women that are perimenopausal and menopausal are in desperate need of progesterone. We've worked with folks for years adding natural, if you will, USP, biologically identical progesterone. It's very helpful for hair stabilization and hair loss coming literally at a follicle level. Lavender, rosemary, thyme, sage in organic essential oils can be very, very helpful. There's even some literature of folks rubbing vitamin E oils into their scalp before going to bed and showing some help, and then combining that with some essential oils. I'm going to stick to the basics. I'm telling you, there's good literature on concentrated 200 milligram tocotrienol blends, which we will get. We did have. BioSils, helpful. Women, saw palmetto concentrates, or men, Prostate Plus essentials. So you can see that there's a couple of nutrients. Zinc essentials. Why? Because zinc has an impact on the enzymes that are involved in converting to estrogen and DHT, dihydrotestosterone. So zinc essentials can absolutely be helpful here too. Labs, all right, women, you got to look at this specifically in women. We don't see this in men, but low serum ferritin, low iron. Men and women, poor digestion. Thyroid, get some hormone and thyroid hormone, and then use some nutrients to naturally modify these conversion processes. Two areas you can get very fancy here. Now, depending upon your state, if you're not in our state, we wouldn't be able to help you here. But outside of Pennsylvania, you can get fancy. Topical spironolactone. Spironolactone, I mentioned earlier, is a diuretic. It is used for a number of areas for women with PCOS or high testosterone levels, diuretics for folks that have heart failure and so on. But spironolactone topically has a modifying process on DHT. And we even know that melatonin in topical solutions can be helpful. So here you have a process. Improve the digestion. Low hydrochloric acid. Folks, we have to make sure you're digesting. If you're using non-steroidals and you're using PPIs, acid-blocking drugs, they're potential problems. Women, if you have low iron status, that is a huge problem. Guys and gals, if you're converting your testosterone to DHT in an inordinate fashion, that certainly is a problem. I can still have the genetic leaning and tendency, but I can push this, I can make it like an avalanche and push the whole process forward. Otherwise, a drug like finasteride wouldn't work. Now, would it? If it was completely just dependent upon this process, you could use finasteride in mega doses and it wouldn't help. But we know that there's something about poisoning and damaging and oxidative distress to the follicle, why some of the studies showed that if you just get individuals on high doses of antioxidants, it preserves and protects and helps to reduce some of the damage. So we know that there's this DHT is creating in high levels in a genetically susceptible population, high levels of oxidative distress. I will tell you, we're going to put together the pack. If you have some support on board, you're digesting well. Women, you make sure your iron levels are okay. Women and guys, we get your male and female hormone levels balanced. And we evaluate at least a one-time on thyroid. But if nothing else, you say, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to do some supplementation. I'll have a pack ready for you within a short period of time on tocotrienol blends, BioSil, and we'll figure out how we want to do this, some Prostate Plus Essentials and Zinc Essentials that you literally will have a little pack that you can put together that you can use, that I think is hugely beneficial and hugely helpful. I want to thank you for being with us today. Hair loss. It's a huge issue. Folks spend tens of thousands of dollars many times having transplants and hair. And I get it. I understand. I'm pretty fortunate. I've had minimal, but I've had it. But I remember a period of time back in school and college that I went through a period where I had significant hair loss. And at that time, I figured out what it was. It was stress. It was just school. It was academics. I wasn't eating well. I eating pizza all the time. I had, obviously drinking the wrong types of beverages at that point in time in my life. Just not understanding the ABCs. And I'd be combing my hair. I'm like clumps in my comb and my brush. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I was like 19, 20 years old for a period of a couple years. This is horrible. What's going on? And I began to think there's something different. I don't know. I don't understand this, but does it have something to do with too much beer and poor diet, and I don't eat, and all the stress that I'm under? Maybe I should start taking some supplements. This was 30 plus years ago. And literally I was able to arrest it at that time. I knew nothing of what I was doing, virtually nothing, and just began to do some things. This is a much more sophisticated level. But you can, for many of you, if we can get these processes in line, we can certainly impact the rate of progression, reduce the rate of loss. If that still doesn't help you, then you have no options but to see a dermatologist in many cases and pursue more significant intervention. But God bless you. Thanks for being with me. We'll figure out our next topic. I would hope that you would go back and view on our website, AskJoeD.com, AskJoeDiMatteo.com. You have family members and friends that are having health issues, digestion, reflux, heartburn, heart disease. There's dementia and Alzheimer's in the family. We have literally dozens upon dozens of live streams. And you're just going to have to scroll back through, go to the website, go to the archives, hit that arrow button, and just keep scrolling back through. And you'll see everything from thyroid to digestion to PMS and PMDD for women to prostate health in men. We've got just a whole myriad of topics. God bless you. Thanks for being with us. And remember to be careful. I'm talking to myself. I got to be careful of making idols in my life on a day-to-day basis, and how that begins to affect my walk and my relationship with Him. And the Bible says that as those that make those idols, whether by hand or by focus and intent, we become like the idol in essence. Literally, God wants us to be continuously converted in a line, in an area of submission to Him. God bless. Man, thanks for being with us. I'll see you on the next live stream to be announced. Stay tuned. See you.